Hey y'all, thanks for stopping by. As you saw from the title, we are going to talk about vegetable gardening. Now, every year, my husband and I plant a garden. We have been in our house for 3 summers. This will be our 3rd summer this year. And we have put a garden in every year. We have no gardening experience before we bought our house. So everything we did was all new to us. There's been a big learning curve for us. Everything that we learned was from books and from online, and when we would ask people, for advice, the issue we run into is everyone has a different opinion, and it was really hard to just go to one source and get the information we need. We felt like we had to go to all these different sources and kind of pick what we wanted to listen to from different people, and it was very confusing. So now I feel like I have a better hold on what I'm doing. I am an amateur gardener. I am not a professional by any means. No, everything I plant does not come up. Some things are total flops every single year, but we just keep trying and we find out what works for us. So I do want to say that I will be talking about planting in the ground for this video, not container gardening. So I feel a lot of the information would be very similar. And I also want to mention that we live in hardiness zone 6. Now, if you don't know anything about gardening, you're like, what does that mean? So in the United States, there is a hardiness zone map, and basically what it tells you is what vegetables grow or fruits grow well in your zone. So I'm in Tennessee, I'm in East Tennessee, so I can't grow a lot of things that they may be able to grow in California. The climate isn't tropical enough, or, a lot of people in the far north probably can't grow some of the things that I can grow. So this helps you to know what zone you're in. I highly recommend finding out what zone you're in, and then when you start gardening, you can search for that. Do tomatoes grow well in whatever zone you're in, if that makes sense. If you go to farmers markets, then in the summer, then you can see what they have, and probably those things grow well in your area. However, it is a really good idea to know a little bit about what zone you're in. So now that you know what zone you're in, I have 11 points that I want to make to help you figure out how to start your garden. The first point is location. Your garden is going to need at least 6 full hours of sun a day. 8 is better for things like tomatoes, but at least 6 hours. So what I did was I would go outside on the weekend and I would just kind of watch the sun and just see what area was getting the most sun. You need to be mindful of trees because you plant your garden in April, late April, and a lot of the trees are not at their full point yet, right? Like they're not grown out as big as they're gonna get. So be mindful of that because you don't want to plant near a tree and then in the summertime that tree shades your garden and then your vegetables don't get the sun they need. So it needs to be an open area away from trees. The second thing I want to talk about is row direction. So it's recommended to plant from north to south. So you would want to know, what direction your garden is going in, and then your rows would run north to south. Now, I know that this is the recommended way to do it, but I don't do it that way because of the way my yard is set up. It works better for me to run my rows east to west. And I haven't really ever had an issue with it this year. My husband and I may decide to switch it up and do it the way it's recommended. But yeah, in the Northern Hemisphere, because of the way the sun moves around, they recommend that they go north to south. So just something to be mindful of. However, I really believe that you do whatever works best for you and your space. The third point I want to make is a water source. You will need to water your garden, especially in the early stages. I am in Tennessee. We have very dry summers a lot of times, so it's imperative for me to have a hose to water my garden. We just have a hose at our house, and we have a couple of attachments to it to make it longer, so we just pull it out to the garden and water it that way. You can set up irrigation. They make hoses that you can set up that you turn your main faucet on and it'll water the garden, but you still need to be able to get a hose out there. So if you have a big, space, then you just need to make sure that you have a way to water your garden. The fourth thing that you need to think about is, what are you going to grow? That's probably the most important thing, right? So I think it's best to make a list of the foods that you eat normally. It can be really overwhelming to go to Lowe's or to go to your local nursery and look at their seed packets. Wow, you'll get in there and you're like, I don't eat cucumbers, but yeah, this looks really good. This is really cool. Oh, Brussels sprouts. I hate Brussels sprouts. Let's grow them anyway. Like, it can be really overwhelming, and you just start grabbing stuff because you're so excited. So make a list of what foods do we eat, what vegetables do we eat all the time, and those are the ones that you'll want to grow. For us, okra is a really big vegetable that we love to eat. Okra is so expensive, even in the summertime for some reason. It's expensive at the farmer's market. We grow okra and we love it. So that's a big one for us. That's another thing to consider when you're thinking about what to grow is it going to be cheaper for you to grow it at home? Because if it's something you don't eat very often, then it's probably going to be cheaper for you to just go buy it at the grocery store. So just think about that. The fifth thing I want to talk about is starting to plan your garden. Some vegetables grow better planted straight into the dirt. Some vegetables grow better when they're transplanted. This means that it's a plant, it's already grown into a plant, and then you transplant that into the ground. So with transplants, you can buy them like at Lowe's or at your local nursery, or you can start those seeds indoors. A few plants that are really good to start indoors are tomatoes, bell peppers, onions, and other peppers. Those are the first things that come to mind for me. But basically, when you go to your Lowe's or wherever you buy your plants, the plants that you see that they already have, they're already growing, that means that those are ones you should have started indoors. So if you don't want to mess with starting seeds indoors, just go buy those plants or order them from a catalog like Burpee online. Just do something like that. If this is your first time ever gardening, I recommend not messing with starting seeds indoors because you don't want to get overwhelmed and then give up. However, if you are going to start seeds indoors, you can buy, you'll need a grow light, you'll need a tray to put the plants in, and you can buy these little peat, P-E-A-T is what they're called. They're like little cubes that you put your seeds in. You can buy the peat already, or you can go ahead and make your own. I did it one year and pretty much everything I started indoors failed. That was my first year. I think I'm gonna try it again this year though. So, broccoli, that's another one you start indoors, and that's the one I wanna grow. So I think I am gonna try it this year. The thing about starting indoors also is that you have to start early enough. So right now is near the end of February. This is about the time that you would start your seeds indoors. So if you miss that cutoff, don't worry about it because you can just go buy those plants in the store. So there are some seeds that are better to start outdoors, like squash and beans, okra, things like that, just go straight into the ground. So it's a good thing to know what plants you're gonna need to buy and what seed packets you're gonna need to buy. A resource that I really like to use is Farmer's Almanac. They have growing guides online, and it tells you by your zip code when to start your seeds indoors or start your seeds outside or put your plants straight into the ground. They tell you exactly like the windows of time that you're supposed to do that. So I would recommend, like I said, making a chart of tomato and then say place plant in ground and then like between these dates, and just kind of have like yourself a little visual chart so you can look at it and know when you're supposed to do these certain things so these tasks don't fly by you without you realizing it. The sixth thing I want to talk about is companion planting. Companion planting means putting plants together that do well with each other and also keeping plants away from each other that do not like each other. Some plants can stunt other plants' growth and things like that. I don't find this 100% necessary to know, but it is good to know, just, growing your knowledge of gardening. It's kind of good to keep those things in mind. I know the first time I planned our garden, I was so overwhelmed with everything, with how far apart the plants need to be, and don't put the tomatoes with the corn. And like I was so over, which I didn't grow corn, but I know tomatoes and corn don't go well together. But I was just so overwhelmed by that it was easier just to not think about some of these things. So like I said, don't let this overwhelm you at all. I'm just giving you some things that you can think about that are helpful to know.
So this chart will show you some companions to your vegetables and some adversaries, and it also lists herbs and flowers that go well with your vegetables, which we'll talk about in just a second.
The other thing I want to mention is there are some herbs and flowers that you can put in your garden that will help your vegetables grow, and it also just kind of makes the garden look nice. I always plant marigolds around the perimeter of my garden. Borage is, I think it's technically an herb, but it's a beautiful blue flower, and it keeps aphids away from tomatoes. So lavender is really good for keeping bugs away. So there's, certain things like that go really well with your vegetables. There are also herbs that go really well with some of your vegetables, like rosemary and basil and things like that. Even if you didn't want to plant your herbs straight in the ground, you could put them in pots and just like have them situated around your garden. That could look really pretty. I did that last year with a stevia plant. The seventh thing I want to talk about is the size of your garden. Something that we did not think about the first time we planted our garden is how much the plants spread out, especially things like squash. They kind of vine out. So they start like this, and then and they just crawl all over everything. So you will have a row of plants, and then a walkway, and then another row of plants. So what happened to us is our plants took over our walkway, and then we didn't have any space in between to walk between these plants. That's a problem, because you need to be able to get in between your plants so that you can pick them and weed them and things like that. So definitely make your walkway larger than you think you're gonna need it. I like to put something that spreads really big next to something that doesn't really spread. So I'll have my squash in this row, then my walkway, and I'll do like pole beans. They grow up so they don't spread out. Our garden is 30 by 30, and I can get like 4 or 5 squash hills in one row, which is a lot of squash. It's definitely more than we need usually, which is nice just to have a little bit of extra room if I decide I want to throw something in there last minute. But I recommend starting small. Ours was 20 by 30, and then we increased it because we just got excited. In addition to talking about the size of the garden, one thing I want to mention is that your seed packets will have all the information that you need on them. This is something I did not know when I started gardening, so I was getting all my information online. But when you buy your seed packet, there's information on the back of the packet, but most packets, when you open them up, the insides are completely printed with information. It's awesome because they'll tell you how far apart to put them. A lot of them will tell you companion plants and adversary plants. They'll tell you how you can store your plants after they're harvested. A lot of them will give you ideas to cook in the kitchen, and so yeah, it's really helpful to actually have your seed packets in front of you, and you can get all the information that you need to know from them. The eighth thing I want to talk about is compost. Our soil is horrible. It's horrible. It's like red clay. It's really thick. We tried to grow sweet potatoes 2 years ago. Horrible. We couldn't get them out of the ground because the soil's not loose enough. I know now I cannot grow sweet potatoes in my soil. I could create a raised bed and I could grow them in there. You need to be mindful of what your soil looks like really before you choose what to grow. I probably should have put this tip earlier because this is a very important thing to know. So I recommend going out with a shovel, digging in your ground, and seeing what your soil looks like. You will need a tiller, and that's going to turn your ground up. So if you really want to see what your soil looks like, dig down a little bit, like 6 to 8 inches, and really see what it looks like. If it's crumbly and just falls apart really easy, that's really good for growing potatoes. If it is like a clay sponge, you're not going to grow a potato in there. We buy compost, but I recommend putting compost in the first time you garden. No matter how amazing your soil is, I would still add in compost. Now, if you know someone who owns horses, you could ask them if you could come clean out their stables, and I'm sure they would love for you to do that. And you can just add that manure straight into your garden. We don't know anyone, so there's like a mushroom factory near us. So we go there and we spend like $60 to $80 for a truck bed full of mushroom compost. So we go get that, bring it home, we'll put it over the garden, spread it, and then he'll chill it in with our soil, and it just helps our soil. Every single year that you grow vegetables in your soil, you are helping aid your soil to get better. This is our 3rd year, and ours is already better than it was when we started. You can also get pH testing kits. When you start with vegetables, you will see on the seed packets and on information online, they'll talk about the pH of the soil needed for this or that vegetable. I've never done that. I find it overwhelming, but if you do want to get a pH testing kit and just really get into the science of it, go for it. So some items that you're gonna need to start a garden: a spade, shovel. You'll want a hoe because you're gonna be dealing with weeds and they're horrible. Get a water source. You'll need, I like a little mini spade, like a little handheld, so that when I'm putting the seeds in the ground, I don't have to have this giant thing. I can be there on the ground and, you know, scoop the dirt up and put it in. Need tomato cages if you are growing tomatoes. You'll need a trellis if you're doing pole beans. Trellising can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. If you're someone who is very good with woodworking and you have the tools to do it, you could create a really cool wooden trellis with like chicken wire. That could be really neat. You'll also obviously need gloves, and I like to have markers. I will draw a chart. If I grow 5 squash hills in a row, I'll put X's on my chart for all those squash hills, and then I'll write the varieties underneath it. But it can also be helpful to use markers, especially for things like beans, because say you have a long row and you have 2 different kinds of bean in it. When you plant them, you really want to know where one variety ends and where the next one starts, right? Otherwise, you have no idea because you can't see the seeds once they're planted. With the squash hills, can't really hide that. But when you're planting beans, you don't know where they are. So it's really good to have markers. The last thing I want to mention is, when do you plant your garden? I go by the Almanac. This is my Almanac book. It's called the Old Farmer's Almanac. Every single year they print out another version, and it's kind of fun to look at. It has like some old wives' tales in it. It's got a lot of information. It's got information about fishing and hunting, and it's got recipes in it and all kinds of fun stuff. But the thing that I like it for is in the back, it talks about gardening, and I garden by the moon signs. My grandmother gardens this way, and she passed it down to me, and I'm really proud to keep it going, and it's just kind of fun to do. So there are certain signs that are better to plant in than others. You can definitely Google this and read about it. People have been using this method of planting a garden for years. I want to say hundreds of years.
So I got this from the Almanac website, and it just tells you the signs that are best to do certain things under. So for example, you want to plant under Scorpio, you can harvest under Aries, Leo, etc. And this is a calendar that shows you all of those dates. So for example, May 6th and 7th, the sign is in Scorpio, so that'd be a good time to go ahead and plant your garden, especially if you're in Tennessee like me.
The other thing you need to know is frost date. Most of your packets will tell you how far after your last frost to start your garden. Typically in Tennessee, you want to start your garden at the very end of April, very beginning of May. I usually do the beginning of May because we have something called, I think it's blackberry winter. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's like early May. So you usually want to do your planting after that, but I like to do it pretty early. So that is my growing guide. I hope you've learned something. I hope you don't feel overwhelmed if you did before.
Okay, y'all, so I wanted to end this video by showing you some of the things that we grew in our garden last year. Most of these are squash because that's what we had the most of. And here's some pictures of our garden. So, you know, when I started, like I said, I didn't know anything. And this is where I am 3 years later. So it's pretty incredible the things you pick up along the way. And my advice is to just dig a hole, you know, throw some seeds in and just see what happens. You'll be so proud of yourself, and the food from your garden will taste better than anything you've ever eaten. So I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Like it, please, and subscribe, and I will see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Bye.